Hey everybody, welcome back to Out of the Ordinary with Jay, and I am back with the professor. Hey Phil, how are you?
Doing well. How are you, Jay?
Good. So we were going to talk. You had a great idea for a topic of conversation, which is actually timely, given that we're going into the new year, 2026. Which, by the way, before we get into what we're going to talk about is the future of human civilization. Is it going to be good, bad, Star Trek, or more like 1984? But it occurred to me as I was getting ready for this interview, we're now closer to the year 2050, 2050, than we are Y2K.
That's true.
Isn't that crazy? We're closer to the year, I interviewed somebody a little bit older some weeks ago. We're closer to the year 2100 than when they were born in 1950.
Wow.
Isn't
that's incredible? Yeah.
Incredible, right? So, is that right?
Yeah, because that would be 1950 was
Anyway,
76 years
just
ago.
Just bonkers
now.
to think about that we're closer to the year 2050 than we are Y2K, which a lot of people have, memory of. So, anyways, I guess we'll just start with, what are your thoughts on it? Are we going to be like is the future good like a Star Trek, or is it like Hunger Games? What are we looking at here?
I think we're looking at something more like Star Trek. At least that's my hope.
Okay.
Yeah, I just looking at the trends and the progress that humanity's made over the last several millennia.
Right.
I think it's obvious that we are going to keep progressing and things are going to continue getting better. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that it's going to be a constant upward.
Yeah, there's always
slope.
setbacks, and then you make progress after such, like World War II, for instance, and then you come out of it. That type of situation.
Sure,
is what
there
you
will
mean.
Always be
hiccups.
Yeah, always hiccups. There you go.
Not to put World War II in the same light as a hiccup, but yeah. So, I guess I'm just curious. Has your position changed on that? Did you ever have like sort of a dystopian, sort of a negative view, like, oh man, because there's a lot of stuff, in the news and a lot of things that you could pick from to say like, boy, we're not going in the right direction. And I think everybody could do that, whatever their persuasion is and whatever, the previous generation could say that, the previous generation could say that, but were you ever not thinking that it was going to be a good future?
I don't think so, because I grew up, as a kid, I grew up during the space race.
Okay.
And so that's how I got interested in astronomy when I was young, is that it was during the Apollo moon landings.
Gotcha.
In the late 60s, early 70s. And
so you're probably like, everything's possible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I grew up with Star Trek, and I just grew up with that mindset that we've been progressing for centuries and centuries, and things continue progressing. Right. And I guess as a kid, I assumed that progress would continue. And as an adult, I don't have to assume it anymore. I can examine what has happened in the past and what's happening now, and I can think about it in a more critical way. And I still think that we're going to keep progressing, and things will continue to get better.
So with
occasional setbacks, of course. Sure.
Because I get vexed in my own opinion on this, because on the one hand I'm like, oh my gosh, I look at the technology today, AI and what they can do with technology and what they can do with some of the healthcare breakthroughs and things like that. And but then on the other hand, I'm like, man, there's like in 1984, right? The movie was very surveillance heavy, and they were tracking all citizens. And I'm like, well, man, they kind of got cameras on every street corner now, and they track the phones and all that stuff, right? So the surveillance heavy thing is real and easy to accomplish. And then I'm like, then I think of like another dystopian type idea, like the Hunger Games, which is like, the difference between the have and the have-nots is getting pretty big nowadays. Even though general poverty has gotten less, the discrepancy between those that are really wealthy and those that are not is pretty large. And so I kind of go, like, some days I feel like, oh, we're doomed. And then other days I'm like, nah, we're going to figure our way out of this like we always do.
Okay, I'll respond to,
Please.
There are two different things there. So first, the surveillance state. So,
and I don't even know if that's good or bad. I'm just making a comment on it.
And it's neither, because it's just like any other technology. It's how it's used.
Sure.
And so surveillance is fine as long as it's used properly. If it gets to the point where, and how it's used depends on the type of government we have, the types of social norms that we have, et cetera. So if that surveillance is used strictly for things that the populace generally
he went
agrees,
hiking and he's lost. Where is he?
right,
Right,
or
Who caused the traffic accident?
Right, who caused the traffic accident? Who, you have the Luigi Mangione thing. He shot the CEO of United Healthcare. So we have surveillance cameras all over the place that can assist in those types of things. But if it's being used for purposes that we as a general populace do not think are
and it will be. It will be. That's the point that I'm going to
ethical.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. If
they will be, though, they always do. That's the thing. Technology is always used for good and for bad. Like as an example, just recently, right before Christmas of all times, I just happened to be getting ready to I was just checking my credit card statements, and it was like $10,000 on there of charges I had nothing to do with, right? They were, and it's, by the way, it's a card I don't even keep in my wallet. I've used it maybe once. I only use it when I travel out of the country. So I very rarely use this card. Somehow, some way, there's a whole bunch of charges on. Now, thankfully, they got taken care of. But that's sort of like one of those situations where I'm like,
scary.
You can like, and I'm very protective and guarded of it, but still, somehow somebody got it.
Wow.
And like, that's an instance where, it's like, all the information's out there. They can, anyways. I don't know where I was going with that.
I don't know either.
Yeah, anyway.
But that's the surveillance state. So like any other technology, it's just a matter of how it's used. So I don't think it's inherently bad. The other thing you mentioned was the gap between the haves and the have-nots.
Yes.
And again, you mentioned that generally the floor has been raised for everyone. So even if you look
statistically, that's true.
Yes. And just in terms of the quality of life, if if you take someone who's near the bottom of the economic ladder, say in this country, that person is probably still better off in many ways than someone like the Rockefellers at the turn of the late 1800s, early 1900s.
They have more at their disposal. They've got better plumbing, better electricity, more reliable power, all of these things, information at their fingertips.
Yeah, they have better health.
Don't have to worry about farming their own food, most likely.
Right.
So, yes.
So things that we take for granted that have made our lives better, people didn't even have, even the wealthiest people didn't have those things.
Right.
120, 150 years ago. So in that sense, the floor has been raised. Now, you mentioned that the gap between the haves and the have-nots is getting greater and greater.
Well, yeah, but 400, the guy worth $500 billion and other people worth,
But then you get to the point where, at what point does it not matter anymore? Would Elon Musk be any less happy if his fortune was halved?
Yes, he would be. He would be, and the reason is because they're just keeping score. But in terms of well-being and what you could do, nothing changes.
Absolutely,
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the gap may keep growing, but as long as the floor is rising for everyone,
then that's the everybody. Yeah, I get that. So, with all of the new technology and stuff coming, this is another question I have is on the one hand, it could be ultimately provide a lot more freedom. As an example, right? If you're getting to where people have to work a lot less because, say, AI is doing a bunch of the more menial tasks, and say the 40-hour work week becomes a 30-hour work week or whatever the new normal is, that in that case gives us kind of more freedom. But on the other hand, if we're being sort of surveilled more or have, we have to have more passwords and more PIN numbers and things like that, it's we have less freedom. So I don't know, do you think we're gonna have less or more freedom? Because usually the gambit in life is usually you often trade freedom for security, right?
True.
I mean, so I don't know, where this is going. I almost feel like we may have a little less freedom, but we'll feel more secure. I don't know. What do you think about this?
Well, I agree, but you were also talking about keeping track of passwords and all this other stuff. That you're talking about complexity there, and that is one thing with increased technology and reliance on technology. Things do become more complex. That's for sure.
Right.
I mean, it seems to me things are a lot more complex now than when I was younger. I remember when I used to go into the bank and make a deposit or withdrawal. It was lickety split. You brought your little bank book and you were in and out of there in a few seconds. Now it's not that time consuming whether you go see a person or go to an ATM.
Well, like I'll give you an example.
But it is a little more complicated, putting in a PIN number or whatever.
Right, but it would not surprise me. This is a great a great example you brought up. Is I can totally see 5 years from now where it's definitely like a retinal scan versus a PIN number. 100% would make sense to me, right? They're not going to fake that, blah, blah, blah. Now, is that better or worse, right? Is that more free or less free? It's definitely more secure,
right?
Anyway, I don't know. I don't know. Like, what do you think about social media? On the one hand, right, it's supposed to be like this large-scale connection tool, which I know from using it myself. I've reached out to be able to find friends that I would have never been able to find otherwise, and things like that. On the other hand, I can clearly see how it's a propagandist dream and a behavioral shaping machine. So on that one, I'm sort of like, I don't know, that one might be more bad than good from my perspective, at least right now in its current iteration. But, I don't know if there's any stopping that, and what does that portend for the future? Does that lean us more towards a Star Trek or more towards a 1984 Hunger Games? The more I think about it, I'm a Luddite, and not really. Yes, I met the only person who is not on social media, America. This is the guy, Professor Phil, not on social media. So this is great.
I think there are a couple others out there.
No, you're it. You're the only one. No. But this is great though, because it's such a unique position to have and a unique way to live that it makes your perspective like infinitely more interesting. So go, please.
I don't know about that, but I used to think that the social media and all that was bad, basically, or potentially very, very dangerous. But the more I thought about it, the less I think that that's true. Because you're talking about how social media shapes our opinions and our behaviors. Well, since for both of us, we grew up with television and radio. And do you think television and radio were really much different in terms of shaping our habits? All the advertising shaping our.
I think so. And the reason why
Well, of course, you can speak to it more than I can because
the only reason I would say so is it's the same idea, right? It's like, we're being shown ads and now all of a sudden I want to eat pizza, right? That is true, but this is so much more personalized, so much more dialed in. It is perfection in terms of its way to get your eyeballs to stay engaged. The engagement algorithms are insane now. And so are they the same? Yes, but this is like on steroids that are on more steroids. And that'd be the only thing that I would say. So has it always been there? Yes, but this is just way more, like I kind of look at it this way, if I may. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So what you're saying is that one of the problems with social media is how it hooks you and keeps you addicted to it. And the way that it can promote, it's like an echo chamber. It's like talking in like an echo chamber of your own thoughts. So whatever, rather than getting differing opinions, it's more like it's reinforcing your stuff, and it's almost always through negativity, because negativity, sparks the brain a lot better than positivity. Right.
People are much more inclined to look at the train wreck than puppy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Of course.
So those things, it's very challenging. Anyway, I don't know.
Okay, I lost my train of thought. You went off in another slightly different direction.
But it was basically, social media, a net positive or a net negative, especially as it portends for the future. And I just have a lot of concerns.
I know what I was thinking. You were talking about people getting sucked into it and being addicted to it.
Yes.
But people always have done whatever it is they're interested in doing. So if you find being on social media or looking at videos or whatever on your computer, if that's what you enjoy doing, in the past, it might be, I like watching television because it doesn't require any, and before that, look at me. I love to read. If I'm not doing something, I'm reading a book. Is that any worse than reading something online or watching a video online?
Those are all okay, right? I'll give you an example of a potential downside, because you're right, those are all good things. That's a net positive for social media.
It depends what I'm reading. I can read all kinds of trash.
Exactly. Like if say you're the town nut, you're one guy in a rural community, you've got this really fringe opinion that is not based on what everybody else thinks. Well, in that town, you'd be isolated and be kind of known as the goof, right? But now, because of the internet and its reach and social media and its reach, you could find 100,000 people just like you and get critical mass, and now you have a movement that otherwise would not have been there. Like I try to think of...
But then maybe the other people, because of social media, maybe the people in your town who otherwise would not know that your ideas are way out there, maybe now they know, and they say, hey,
possible.
did you know that?
I guess what its stuff is that you can build critical mass on weird stuff. And that's the thing, because here's a good example. Say that X, Twitter, and Facebook and Instagram and stuff were around when Hitler was coming to power, right? Would it have been good? Because then people could be chirping about, hey, this is going on, this is not right. Or would he have been able to assemble it even more powerfully and more quicker as a consequence of having this technology? And that's my only thing, is I don't know if it's a net positive or net negative.
Or would have opposing viewpoints had more weight and exposure. Look at what's happening in Iran right now. So what did the government do? They shut down the internet. They shut down, all that stuff, so people can't communicate as well. So here you have, if that stuff was around when Hitler came into power, maybe people would have rebelled. They would have had a means of communicating. Hey, this is kind of crazy. Why are we?
Possibly, but again, if it was state controlled.
But the difference is those are two very different things, and I really shouldn't be speaking about them as though they're analogous, because Hitler was voted into power. Okay, so the Germans voted for the Nazis. Okay, now once he got into power, then things started to go a little bit sideways. Now with the Ayatollahs, it's a little different. Granted, you could say they were voted into power in the sense that you had the Iranian Revolution in the late 1970s.
Well, they were originally, but they weren't voted for permanent power. I think is kind of where the people are kind of pulling away, is they're like, well, we maybe voted you in power once, but it wasn't an eternal.
But I guess my point was simply, I didn't want to say that those situations are equivalent, because they're not. I think my point simply being that you see what impact social media can have in a country like Iran today, and the government shut it down. So maybe if social media had been around, or that technology been around in the 1930s,
it seems
then
like
maybe they could have served a positive purpose when, if people thought that Hitler's policies were getting out of hand.
I'm going to put us down for this. You think probably it might be a net positive. I think it might be a little more of a net negative, and I'm not sure. Is that kind of about right? Somewhere in there? Is that a good, or you're not sure? Okay.
It's like any other technology. It's how you use it. Because
it's not how I use it. It's how everybody uses it. That's the problem. How it gets used by the general population, right? In other words, I might use it one way, but it might be very scary the way somebody else uses it against me or in a different way. Anyway, do you suppose right now, I guess, what's your opinion on modern society? And again, we're in the U.S., right? Do you think we're becoming as a people more resilient, or like more fragile, tougher or weaker? Or do you have an opinion on that?
Well, you would think outwardly it appears that people are generally more fragile, outwardly, because you can see today,
easily offended.
There's, what's that?
Easily offended.
We have safe zones for people, right? You have political correctness. You have identity politics, all this
All that
stuff,
stuff, yeah.
And
Yeah.
but I really don't know if that's the case. If people are any more sensitive today than years ago, because I think about when I was a kid, and I remember people getting offended when in certain situations when I was younger, and people today get offended in the same ways in the same types of situations.
Yeah.
What I did have noticed throughout my life is it depends on geography. Because I will tell you, and I hope no one's offended by I'm already spouting a disclaimer here. I don't want to offend anyone.
Oh, go ahead.
But I will tell you, growing up in New York, I could say things in New York that I would be very hesitant to say in other places, because I've lived in New York, I lived in Florida for a while, lived in New Mexico for a long time, now in Arizona. And I think a lot of it has to do with the culture. And in New York, people, New Yorkers have a reputation for being rude.
They do not suffer fools lightly there.
Exactly.
They do not.
But what I find is that New Yorkers are not rude. Rather, it's more that they are blunt. They are willing to speak what's on their mind, and
A little less sugarcoating.
Yeah, less sugar. That's a great way of putting it. Less sugarcoating, and people are accustomed to it. And then if you go into a different environment with that same attitude, then if without the sugarcoating and whatnot, then it's interpreted differently by people in different parts of the country. Now, I haven't traveled abroad, so I can't say about anything outside the United States, but I can say that within this country, I see a difference in how people how people react to what might be considered
right, they might be offended here
language.
when in New York you'd be like, "What are you talking about?" Right?
Right, or they laugh about it.
Yeah.
It's like,
So let me
it's a
ask.
joke.
Let me ask it in this way too, because I heard this saying, and I'm going to butcher it, but it made a lot of sense to me when I heard it, at least conceptually. I was like, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense." Now think about this, what I'm about to tell you, in sort of like a global scheme of things, and then tell me what you think. It kind of goes like this: tough times. Think depression, think war, right? Tough times make strong people, right?
Okay, right.
And strong people, as a consequence of being strong, make good times, right? Good times then create weak people, and so the cycle continues.
Right.
What do you think about that? Because it made sense to my mind. I was like, that kind of makes sense. But what do you think?
I've heard of that, and actually, I'm reading that book now that you recommended, Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker, and
Solid
he
book.
does allude to that. Doesn't really spend much time on that topic, but does allude to it briefly. And I can't remember if it's a chapter on happiness or if it's a different chapter. But at any rate, the problem is I don't know how much really rigorous data has been collected on that particular trait or characteristic. And I think that's why he may not have spent too much time on it in the book, is because there isn't much hard data on that whole idea.
It'd be kind of hard to track. I mean, were the people really tough, or were they just, were the people really weak?
Or maybe
were the times really that good? It's kind of hard to quantify.
If anything, I think that if you've been through something really traumatic like that, you have a greater appreciation for life. You don't take things as for granted quite as much, because you know how bad things can be. And so when life gets a little rough, you don't bitch and moan about it, because you say, "Hey, this is nothing compared to the war or the depression."
Exactly. That's what I think.
But if you grew up in the land of milk and honey, and everything's always been peaches and cream since you were born, then every little bump in the road is going to be a catastrophe.
Exactly, and I think that's
again. I don't have any hard data, but that would be
seems logical
impression of what.
Yeah, if you had a hard life, and you went through the Great Depression, or some war or whatever, some pretty traumatic event, and then something, life dealt you one of those, this is going to be difficult cards.
Right.
You'd be like, whatever, this is nothing. I've been, but if your life has been all roses, and very easygoing and coddled and just super easy, right? And then life presents you with the inevitable difficult card. You might be like, oh, I can't handle this.
Right.
This is too much.
Yeah.
And so from that standpoint, the saying kind of like resonates with me. It makes sense. Anyway.
It's a matter of perspective. It depends on where you've been, what you've experienced. And of course, all your experiences will help to determine how you react to challenges later in life.
Okay, so I'm putting you down for, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I'm putting you down for the future is going to be bright with speed bumps or with some little bumps along the way.
Sure.
I'm going to put me down for, I think that as well. I think I'm on the same page as you, which is to say, I think the long-term outlook, the long-term future for humanity is good, but with setbacks, kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, that type of situation. But assuming that we're right, and boy, do I hope we are, I really hope we are, what kind of has to go right for humans to kind of get that more optimistic future? Like, what do we have to do right, or what do we have to avoid, or anything like that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what gets us there, or what makes us wrong?
Okay, well, what gets us there is continuing to pursue knowledge. Because it's the pursuit of knowledge and a better understanding of our world that has led to improving conditions and improvements in our quality of life, whether it's medicine or just mechanical devices that made our lives easier. Now we have AI, computer information technology, just continuing to accumulate knowledge and understand our environment better and better, so we can, through that knowledge, we can then create devices that will improve our lives. I mean, that's basically the difference between science and technology. Science is the pursuit of knowledge for the sake of knowledge, because humans are curious creatures.
Right.
We're curious about our environment. We like to understand how things work. The application of what we've learned is technology, and technology is what we use to make our lives better.
Right.
Okay, now, okay, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say, so I'm agreeing with you. Would it be okay if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but does this make sense if I say, okay, I agree with you, but if I say knowledge, because knowledge equals progress, progress equals advancement, advancement equals human flourishing, is that a good way to?
That sounds good to me.
Kind of put it?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Now, as far as things that could serve as obstacles, I think the biggest obstacle is really just human nature and social interactions. I think we have to overcome our tribalism and a lot of things that are very deeply ingrained in us that prevent people in many instances from cooperating with each other. We have this inherent desire to belong to a tribe, to a group, and to oppose anyone that's outside.
Yep.
And I think that that's an impediment going forward. What we have to do is realize that we're all people, we're all human, we have differences, but that's no reason to exclude certain people or be hostile towards one group or another. We have to learn. It's like I feel it's not like I'm coming out of the 1960s, but we just have to learn how to get along with each other. Because I think that social tensions are that's right. There you go. Peace or peace. There you go.
Okay,
Star Trek.
Oh, there you go. Even better.
Well, actually, the peace, live long and prosper.
Oh, there you go.
But
I love that, live long and prosper. By the way, it's such a nice saying. Anyway,
but I think social tensions are one thing that can hold us back, because that creates friction in how people relate with each other, both on an everyday level and also nationwide, and how countries interact. And of course, if there's conflict, whether it's on a personal level or conflict on a national level, then that's going to lead to destruction.
Right, and I'm with you on this. I agree with everything you said.
Progress.
The concern I have is, like, again, not to harp on like the social media or the internet again, but just kind of to add on to that, it enables this tribalism in a way that is profound.
Yes.
That's the first thing. The second thing is I thought when everybody had access to all human knowledge, a la the internet and social media and all this sharing, that it would be a profoundly positive. What we've found is things that I just didn't.
People would be enlightened.
Right. But things that I just didn't even think of came to fruition that were not helpful, like, alternative facts, and you know what I mean, and everybody being able to have, again, you had the one village idiot, now he's got 100,000 like one, and now they're a movement in a society, and now, they've got references, and all of a sudden that's a thing, and it's competing with other things, and so I think you're right. I think those are the things we have to overcome, but I think we will. Sound good to leave it there? Or do you have something else you want to close with? Go ahead, please.
We were talking about Star Trek or 1984 or Hunger Games, whatever.
Right. Good versus bad.
And just to finish on the Star Trek theme.
Yeah, please.
When I was young and inspired by Star Trek and growing up during the space age, and astronauts were walking on the moon, and I thought for sure by 1980 we'd be on Mars and colonizing the solar system. When you think about Star Trek and you think about humans traveling throughout the galaxy, you read science fiction books, whether it's Asimov, who is, by the way, if you haven't read Asimov, Isaac Asimov is far and away the best science fiction writer who ever existed. So
Fact.
Read the Foundation series. You'll be glad you did.
Or just watch it on Apple TV. It's amazing.
Read the books.
Or read the books.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's fine.
I love books.
I know. It's fine.
But anyway, that future where we are star hopping and intergalactic travelers, or at least intragalactic travelers, I don't know how far in the future that is, or if that's even going to be possible. Because if you look at Star Trek or any of those science fiction scenarios, everything's predicated on finding some means of traveling faster than the speed of light. And right now, we don't know if there is any practical means of traveling at faster than light speed. Now, if the speed of light is this cosmic speed limit, that means it's going to take years just to get to the nearest star. Now, there may be planets orbiting most of the stars in our galaxy, but how many of them are habitable by humans?
We'll find out, hopefully.
The nearest habitable planet may be 1,000 light years away from us. We just don't know yet.
Find out.
But then, you hear about terraforming. We could terraform a planet so that it would be hospitable to human, it could support life as we know it, human life and whatnot. But terraforming itself that's a global process, and it would take centuries to terraform.
Again, to the extent that we know.
That we know,
with the technology that we have. So I would just say that. But
that is true. But that's what I'm saying is that whether or not that kind of a future is possible, it may be possible, but it's probably quite a ways off in the future if it is. And there is the possibility that it's not possible, and not in the Star Trek way. Now, granted, people may.
Can I interject for just 1 second?
Okay.
Sorry, just 1 sec. But you said, I don't know if it will ever be possible, blah, blah, blah. To me, I've always been of the opinion of if it doesn't, go against the laws of physics, then it ought to be possible.
Right.
What say you on that? You agree?
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
Okay. So there's that, and then
so as far as the law of physics that we understand right now, like I said, we don't know of any way to travel faster than the speed of light. Then people could
Dyson sphere and wormholes, buddy. Just kidding. I don't even know. Just throwing out some techie stuff because it's fun. Anyway.
So, but it is still possible that humans will colonize the galaxy and maybe beyond. But it's going to take a long time, and it's not like we're going to be zipping around, from here to there. You have breakfast on Earth, and then you can have lunch on Vulcan, and then in the evening be in some other star system. I mean, that
sounds fun. So I would just say this though. I think when I'm going to end this, and then if you unless you have something to add to this, but I think the reason why I'm probably also ending on the side of a more likely good future versus a dystopian future is because I just think people want to live.
Yes.
And I think people want to flourish.
I was thinking the same
I think
thing.
they prefer that over a death and destruction. And I think as long as that holds true, I think we're going to be okay.
Well, that's probably one reason we haven't blown ourselves to smithereens, because
Thank goodness for that.
Mutually assured destruction, MAD, nuclear weapons. Part of the reason there hasn't been a nuclear war is because at least the leaders to date have had enough brains to realize if they launch one of those things, then they're going to suffer just as much, because there's going to be a counterattack. And they said it's self-preservation. So as you said, hopefully self-preservation wins out in the end. Yes.
All right. That will conclude our thing. So I'm glad that we're looking forward to a positive future. And I hope everybody has a great 2026.
That's right.
Thanks, Professor.
Sure thing.
Appreciate it.